you know, maybe just to take a step back to see some of the funny things that the both the Zionist and the media here have considered as to be racist. I'm going to pull one of the tweets here that they call violent, just to show you. The tweet that is, I'm going to read it. This is a tweet that they said is calling for violence and hate. The Palestinian offer of peace to Zionists is the same offer Saladin gave to Crusaders. Accept equality and you can stay unharmed. Loot everything and leave, and you will not get in, nobody will get on in your way, and fight us and you will die. Simple, just, and uncompromising. So apparently, if somebody chooses that they want to maintain their privilege and supremacy, and you fight them, then you are the violent person, not that you gave them an offer to accept equality and live in equality. No, the issue is that you also said you'll fight them if they refuse to end their supremacy. There is a series of tweets that the French media in Quebec have jumped on. The Zionist lobby fed them weirdly. And this is a very important story because they use this to claim that I am racist against French white people. The background on this is that there is a Black rights activist here in Quebec. His name is Ricardo Lamour. He made a complaint against Radio Canada, the French arm of CBC, the government broadcasting agency in Canada, because they were using the N-word over and over and over in the French arm, and he complained to make them stop using the N-word. And he succeeded. The CRTC, the Canadian Radio and Television Commission, earlier in the spring, ruled in his favor after 2 years of the complaint, ordered CBC to apologize publicly and to stop using the N-word on air. And that, as a result of this win by Ricardo, all the French media in Canada went up in arms, and the politicians in Quebec, all of them condemning the decision of the CRTC, claiming that there's, their freedom of speech is right now threatened by this decision of the CRTC, and they want to have the freedom to use the N-word on air. A tsunami of Quebecois nationalist French white supremacists came to the Twitter account of Ricardo and, tweeting N-word, 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 N-word after N-word. And I came to the Twitter account of Ricardo to defend him. And what I did is as a media activist, I thought it would be funny to parody every tweet that used the N-word with using the frog word instead, which is a derogatory term to describe French people, French white people. So I would, anytime they said something with an N-word, I would copy paste it and put a frog word there. And the media in Quebec, including the CBC, unironically, basically took those tweets and claimed that I am racist against French people. The same CBC that is appealing the right to use the N-word doesn't want us to use the frog word. So apparently we're, this is where we're at, the level of media in Canada.
There's 2 points. One is in response to what Margaret said, and one as to you, brother. I really, from a purely legal standpoint, and I think they're going to end up foisting themselves on their own petard. Rather than engaging, and I'm discussing this with other constitutional scholars right now, and we're contemplating bringing an action against Twitter. Rather than engaging in a political dialogue with them, I mean, I'm blocked, I'm gone. They disappeared 40,000 people. and 500,000 tweets, poof, because I repeated initially, because I repeated a tweet that young Zionists, or a scream that young Zionists were, let me back up. There was a post that said, Zionism and Israel represent the history of essentially humanity, love, support, and comfort of Judaism. And I took that screenshot, and next to it I put death to Arabs, death to Arabs, death to Arabs. And someone complained, and they found that to be incitement to violence until, you know, I finally sent them and said, well, no, I think you might want to take a look. That was a rejoinder to the prior post, which is what the Zionist kids have been screaming, and the women and men in foots every week for a solid year, and which you have been posting. And then they said, okay, so just in general, we're blocking you because of hate speech and incitement. And then when I pushed it and said, give me details, give me specifics, let me know. And by the way, I want you to save all communications. I want you to save all posts. I want you to save records of who's donating money to you. I want you to save records of who may be sending messages about me. And you might want to have one of your attorneys talk to me, because between your algorithms and your 25-year-old undergraduate students that sit there looking for hate speech and incitement, they're lost and they're idiots. And here's where I think they're going to end up foisting themselves on their own petard. And that's one of the reasons why Congress is talking today. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, I haven't read the decision, just today remanded a case and ordered the reinstatement of someone's social media posts and their account. And I assume it's because of the shopping center case law. And in a purely legal standpoint, the same predatory corporate greed that brings us Citizens United, that says corporations are human beings for purposes of free speech, have a right to put millions and billions of dollars into the marketplace of ideas. Well, so too, because Twitter and other social media platforms now serve an active, affirmative responsibility of government, with posts from legislatures, with posts from the White House, with benefits that you can sign up for. What they are doing is they are now walking full on into the so-called shopping center marketplace idea, where 30, 40 years ago in the United States, it was held, you may be private, but where you work at the behest of the government, where you perform government services, when you issue propaganda on behalf of the government, you're no longer private. So we are beginning to move in the direction, and what they're going to end up doing is fine. If you want to generate money from corporations, if you want to speak on behalf of Zionism, if you want to speak on behalf of AIPAC, if you want to speak on behalf of the ADL, if you want to speak on behalf of Greenblatt and others, well, then it's a marketplace of ideas. And that's where this is going. But part of the problem is going to be what you've just been talking about, brother. In the marketplace of ideas, it becomes difficult because we don't have the ability to say this speech has to be protected, but that speech can't be protected, because what happens then is the people in power get to announce what is good speech and bad speech. So Stanley Cohen, who in Judaism is a direct descendant of Moses and Aaron, and whose grandfather fought against the Tsar, and whose father liberated concentration camps, and who lost his family in Europe. I'm a self-hating Jew because I challenge the Zionism narrative, because I challenge genocide in Palestine. So this debate of words is going to continue to battle. But where social platforms are really stepping into it now is they are usurping, they are taking unto themselves the ability to control, or trying to, the marketplace of ideas. Now, Canada does not have the same First Amendment protections the United States has. And I'm not naive, I'm not foolish. With this Supreme Court and with the federal courts we have in the United States, and with the history of speech, attempts to repress speech in the United States, it's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's going to be a long struggle. But all of our struggles are long. Nothing worth anything happens overnight. So I am cautiously optimistic that the tide has begun to turn, and the marketplace of ideas is ultimately our strongest ally.
there is a few other tweets that maybe will help us talk about things. I had written a tweet when Colin Powell, the ex-Minister of War, Secretary of War of the United States, passed away from COVID last year. And in this tweet, I said, Colin Powell, the Jamaican house slave of the empire, who extinguished the lives of millions of people with his lies, died a painful death, unable to breathe. If there was any good that came from this pandemic, it would be his death on the birthday of the Prophet of Islam. The Zionists, who seems to be, they think that they can speak on behalf of every racialized community, Black and Indigenous, attacked this as an anti-Black tweet.
A tweet this week that was a complaint was filed earlier in the week where a Zionist spoke about Judaism being a race. And my response was simple. Judaism is not a race, but I do hope you enjoy your day at the tanning salon. And they went nuts. They went totally wacko. And, you know, report after report after report. For what? Hate speech? Truth? Incitement to violence? Or there was a while back several years ago where periodically I would post just simply springtime for Hitler in Germany. And Zionists would lose it and would start talking about Holocaust denial and your support. And it's like, no. Springtime for Germany and Hitler is from the producers. It's a German play and video and a film. And it speaks about war crimes and it speaks about the horrors of fascist government and it speaks about racism. So what they do is, and I think ultimately this is really going to explode because right now I've been involved in some litigation in which we have been working for a while. I've been consultants on ferreting out monies coming from Zionist NGOs in the United States that are being sent to the occupied West Bank to so-called settlements. And the more they repress us, the more they seek to silence our voice, the more litigation that's going to develop and the more discovery that's going to be demanded. And we're going to be seeking information about where are you getting your money from? What organizations are funding you? What states, as Margaret had talked about, what states are directing, contributing, and leading you down this path? And it's a slippery slope because the arrogance of believing that just because you've got, and it's funny, in this piece that I wrote today, which is going to clearly be called anti-Semitic, I highlighted the connections of one of the 5 board members of Twitter to a half dozen Zionist entities in Israel. And when you look a little bit further, you see the new CEO rolled over immediately to Israel, rolled over immediately to Modi, rolled over immediately to other repressive regimes all over the world. So the more they repress and the more we push back and the more litigation it unleashes, the more discovery we will get, the more proof we will get, more they will be exposed. And all I can say to the brothers and sisters out there that are being targeted, never count your, I learned this as a young man from my godfather, who was a famed West Indian Union organizer and president of District 65 of the UAW and an organizing legend. Never measure your success by those who love you, but by those who hate you.
Margaret or Wilmer, if you have anything to say about
Colin. I don't mind anybody disparaging Colin Powell. I don't have a problem with it. It's interesting to me that these people who are so racist would suddenly try to come to the defense of Black people over something that you said about Colin Powell, who was a war criminal, who ruined his own reputation by lying on behalf of the Bush administration. I'll never, when you say his name, I see that picture of him at the United Nations holding up this little tube saying, if this was anthrax, it would kill a jillion people. And the whole thing was a lie. And I'm proud to say I was never fooled for a moment. He showed pictures of trucks and said, there's a mobile lab inside. I mean, it was horrible. But, and I would say this about Colin Powell. they ended up firing him. They needed Colin Powell. He was respected. He was popular. They needed him to sell the war. And then right after Election Day in 2004, the Bush administration got rid of him. And I tell anybody who wants to defend him that that's what happened. They used him to sell war. He could have resigned. He could have refused, but he went along with it. So as far as I'm concerned, you can say as many terrible things about him as you want. Now, I suppose they could find a Black person, and it's a terrible thing. You know, most Black people are loath to criticize those of us who become quote unquote successful. So it could have been problematic for some people, but I don't care what you say about Colin Powell. And I wish I had known. I would have joined in, frankly, and assisted you in responding to these people, these hypocrites who Zionism is by definition racism. It's true. But then they're going to claim to care about Black people. And Israel is very much an anti-Black nation as well. So that's what I would say. I would call Colin Powell, if I was going to talk about him, he's a man who sold his soul. He sold his soul to the empire. He sold his soul and made himself a war criminal. Although that had been his whole career. And he was a careerist. So he went along with everything, the US invasion of Panama. He actually, early in his career, he was one of those who tried to cover up the My Lai massacre. And what was that, the late 60s? So this was his career for a long, long time. And anybody can quote me. I don't care what you say about Colin Powell, and anybody who tries to use your condemnation of him is a hypocrite. But obviously, they are in this case.
It's interesting that you brought up what the establishment in the U.S., what they did to him after they used him basically to sell this war crime of invading Iraq and 1.5 million people that were massacred as a result. Because currently, right now, the Minister of Multiculturalism that cut off the contract for the community media advocacy center that I work for, and because of these tweets, he is Somali Muslim, so he's a brown, Black, African. And he's providing the service now to the state of Canada, the colonialist, white supremacist state of Canada, to have legitimacy to their claims that I am racist. And in fact, he will have the same ending as Colin Powell. The Canadian government right now is going to do a shuffle in the cabinet, and they're going to kick him out because the Zionists are really, even though he's doing exactly what he's expected by his masters, are attacking him on a daily basis because of his ethnicity and his skin color and his religion. So ultimately, no matter how much appeasement a person that comes from a racialized or indigenous background, no matter how much they appease the colonial state, it will just abuse them and throw them away.
First of all, to his credit, he was a loyal soldier. To his detriment, he was a loyal soldier. And I remember when there was all of this discussion about Colin Powell running for president. And as that whole discussion started to gain traction, Colin Powell comes on the news and he says, I'm not going to run for president because I don't want to subject my family to the process and to all of the things that they would be subjected to. So I'm not going to run for president. But there was still this call for Colin Powell to run for president. And then he came back on television and he said, I don't want to subject my family to the process. And then in the Washington Post, there was an article. Alma Powell suffers, I'll paraphrase, Alma Powell has mental health issues. And then the next day, there was an article in the Washington Post. Alma Powell takes antidepressant medication. And I interpreted that as America sending a shot across his bow. Jump on out here, Negro, if you want to. But you talk about subjecting your family to scrutiny, the game has just begun. And then after that, there was no discussion of so I bring that up to demonstrate he was for the elite, he was a useful tool. And when they were done with him, like a broken screwdriver or a broken wrench, he was discarded he was put back on the land of misfit toys. In terms of his presentation at the UN, there's a gentleman by the name now of Dr. Ibrahim al-Marashi. A good part of Colin Powell's presentation at the UN was plagiarized from the doctoral dissertation of Ibrahim al-Marashi. And I know this because I called Dr. al-Marashi and I had him on my show about a week after Colin Powell had appeared before the UN. And he was shocked because what they did was in al-Marashi's dissertation, he presented or he posited some theories about what if scenarios. And so what the White House did was they took those what if scenarios and they turned them into statements of fact. So the thing about the biological laboratory rolling through the desert and all that kind of foolishness, they stole that from him, but they took his what ifs and stated them as fact. So once again, Colin Powell gets played. I did not take from your statement, Laith, an attack on Colin Powell. I took from your statement a critique of Colin Powell's actions. So as an African American, I didn't feel offended. I thought you were spot on. But again, when you challenge the narrative, particularly when you challenge the narrative from a factual basis, you will be attacked by those who have created the narrative and have and use less than accurate fact, who lie in order to support that narrative. So to answer your question, no, I was not offended by your statement at all. I thought you were spot on. And final point on Colin Powell, he had ample time to correct the record. He had ample time to tell the American people, hey, my bad. I was wrong. Hey, my bad. George Bush lied to you. My bad. He had ample time, particularly after he had retired. He could have come and told the American people and told the world that when he was down at the anti-Zionism conference was in Durban, and George Bush wouldn't let him go. He could have come out and told the people he was wrong. He was a loyal soldier to his fault, and he was a loyal soldier to his detriment.
Jooneed, you had something to say, yes.
Yeah, before I get cut off again, I've been having a lot of trouble. with the Zoom. I want to say, Liz, I was extremely impressed by your presentation. I thought you brought every dimension of your predicament right now, and your predicament is our predicament as far as practitioners of free expression. You brought the truth, the fact that you are at the intersection of the struggle for Palestine, with your origin as a Canadian Palestinian, at the intersection of your fight for free expression as a journalist, at the intersection of your struggle for community media, a struggle in which I have accompanied you. And I think you bring all of this together. And what you do not, I think, emphasize enough is how, in this difficult situation you find yourself in, there is also another intersection, and that is the intersection of the Canadian state with a powerful partisan lobby, which is the Zionist lobby. I think up to now, Canada has managed to zigzag its way by repeatedly talking about values-based system, rules-based world order, and not completely giving in to the Zionist lobby, although we all know that in Canadians' value system, Israel has more value and Palestine has none. Whenever Gaza is bombed to smithereens, the Prime Minister or the ministers in Canada will, and the media, the mainstream media, will come out and defend Israel's right to defend itself. Palestine's right of self-defense, which is enshrined in international law, in the UN Charter, that an occupied people has the right to resist occupation by violence if necessary. And Canada has no appreciation, has no place in its vision for that. But at least Canada does not merge so blatantly and so nakedly and so brutally with the Zionist lobby as it has done in your case. Even though by doing that, Canada has proven that your struggle against racism in media, your advocacy of anti-racism in the media, for which you had that project, for which you got the subsidy, well, the government of Canada, the state, the Minister Hussein, just demonstrated that racism in the media was alive and kicking in Canada. I don't know whether the minister realized what he had done. He had proved your point. And this is extremely important. I would just add one word here. It seems to me over the past, should we say, 35 years, the way things have evolved, and I will say evolved in the sense that it has moved forward. In 1988, I did an amazing report on the first Intifada for my newspaper, which is a mainstream paper in Montreal in French. I spent 1 month staying with Palestinian families. And every 2 days, I would change family, I would change village, I would change, starting in Jenin up north, going all the way down Gaza to Rafah along the Egyptian border. And every 2 days, I would write a story simply describing the daily life of Palestinians. This had never been done at that time, I'm talking of 1988, in a major mainstream media in the West. My paper played that story for a month. Every 2 days, a front page story with a picture of a young Palestinian with his face hidden with a keffiyeh throwing a stone. And that picture kept coming back every day, each time there was an article. And when I got back, that shook the Zionist lobby in Montreal, in Quebec, and in Canada. Took them unaware. They were not expecting something like that. They took me to the press council with an accusation, a charge of inciting hatred towards the Jewish people. I thought the press council should have thrown that complaint out. But of course, it's the Zionist lobby. You don't lightly treat a complaint from the Zionist lobby. So they decided to study it seriously. I defended myself. It took them 2 years and more before they finally issued a ruling. And in that ruling, they said, my paper, La Presse, and myself, we had done our job as journalists to inform the public about the real life, daily life, reality of daily life of Palestinians. So they gave us good marks on that. However, they added 2 or 3 paragraphs later, some words that were used in some of those articles were of such a nature as to incite hatred towards Jewish people. And they quoted 3 words or 3 expressions which had been used in a total of about 20,000 words. My bosses said, we can live with that judgment. They said we did our job. I said, you can, but I cannot. I cannot live with this half of blame that I use words that incited hatred. So I appealed. I exercised my right of appeal. It took the Press Council of Quebec another 3 years before they finally ruled that they withdrew that semi-blame. I'm telling you how things were 35 years ago. Now, 2022, while the unipolar world is sinking, while the multipolar world is emerging in Samarkand, while B'Tselem, human rights organization inside of Israel, together with Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, have detailed reports agreeing that Zionism is apartheid. Look how far we have moved.
Yeah, and
now.
also, of course, the B'Tselem report starts by stating that there's a regime of Jewish supremacy from the river
Yes.
to the sea. And, so it is finally acknowledging what Palestinians have been saying for 100 years before that. And we are on a different stage.